This is the place that we bought when me and my husband was young. We've been out here since about 1949. All my kids was all born here, 5 girls and 2 boys. A lot of memories is in it. I love my house, and I wanted to stay here until I die.
Rosina Whitfield has lived in this house in Houston, Texas for nearly 70 years. Then Hurricane Harvey made landfall in August 2017.
When the water started coming in the kitchen, and I went in there and I was walking in water, and I said, oh, all the water's in here? I couldn't believe it. I looked out the back door and it was just like a lake out there. It was so much of water.
1 trillion gallons of water fell on the Houston area over a 4-day period, by far the most rainfall in U.S. history. More than 90 people died.
The rain wouldn't stop. Felt like we were at Noah's Ark or something. I yelled at my husband, we're not gonna win this. It's just coming in.
This time we had the kids and we lost everything again.
Estoy apretado. Ayudar a mi mamá, mandarles dinero para sus comida.
I didn't have blood insurance this time because it was too hot.
Estamos completamente en la ruina.
In Houston, Hurricane Harvey hit everyone. But after the waters receded, will there be an equal recovery?
We can't go with a clean slate assuming that Harvey affected everybody equally, because it didn't.
Have you gotten help from Red Cross or FEMA or the city?
No, we haven't. I went this morning and applied to the Red Cross, and I haven't heard from them. And FEMA has denied me.
So you've received no assistance?
No assistance from nowhere.
Are you worried about losing your home?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I believe that we're going to recover.
You have 2 cities, haves and have-nots. That also translates into who gets the best of things when it comes to flood protection and who gets left out.
A month after Harvey hit, when media attention had moved elsewhere, fault lines traveled to Houston to see if the storm will deepen the city's social and economic divide.
Yo salí en la madrugada como a las 5 de la mañana. El agua no estaba tan alta, nos llegaba como por aquí. Nos salimos con el miedo, nos salimos todos porque se iba subiendo más el agua. Caminé con el agua sucia, incluso estaba bien feo.
This is Clayton Homes. It's a public housing development for some of Houston's poorest residents. Maria Linares and her family lived here. She was 9 months pregnant when the hurricane hit. She escaped with her husband, mother, and 4 kids. Days after evacuating, she gave birth.
And where are you living now?
Con los hermanos de mi esposo.
These houses were some of the worst hit. Residents were left to look for a new place to live.
I think I remember how to put these on.
Reverend James Caldwell is a community leader who's helped residents clean up their homes. A health study funded by the New York Times found that floodwaters in one home here contained toxins. The levels of E. coli bacteria were over 100 times higher than what's deemed safe. In one family's kitchen, they also found high levels of lead, arsenic, and other harmful metals. During the hurricane, 20 million gallons of sewage water overflowed from plants all over the region. Reverend Caldwell took us to see Maria's house.
Go across the street here and take a look in this home. What you'll see here is just like every unit in this area, in this section here. People just had to get out. They left everything that they had, and you're about to see what that was. You see where the water level was? 3 to 4 feet, easily. When you look at this is someone's life, history, everything. Now, who they are, their identity, their culture, it's all gone.
Will she have a lot of good options in terms of where to go or where to move to?
That is still up in the air. And it's not just for her, but for thousands of others. How do they recover when their life, livelihood, everything is gone? How do the kids get in school? I mean, how do you repurchase or regain some semblance of normalcy? How do you do that? You know what I mean, without any assistance. And then by the same token, you're being denied by Red Cross and FEMA any assistance that's going to help you to maintain a normal way of life.
Will you be able to move back into this home?
No,
Do you know where you'll go?
no, todavía no sé.
During the hurricane, Clayton Homes was especially vulnerable because it sits on the edge of this waterway, the Buffalo Bayou.
Incluso el bayuco que está allá atrás se desbordó todo y fue que se inundaron los apartamentos.
Further downstream is Manchester, a majority Latino community. 1/3 of the residents here live in poverty. It's located near Houston's shipping channel, one of the largest petrochemical complexes in the world. Well over a dozen plants in the region reported spills or leaks during Harvey. Dr. Robert Bullard is known as the father of the environmental justice movement. He's found that minority neighborhoods are at more risk to industrial pollution than other communities.
It's okay to put a landfill, incinerator, garbage dump, refinery in Black and brown communities. To say somehow that even in a city like Houston, where we don't have zoning, but if you look at and map vulnerability and proximity of these dangerous facilities, they're not randomly distributed. Race maps with vulnerability and pollution maps with race and class. And race is the most potent factor that determines where these facilities are located.
This is where Houston and the Houston Ship Channel meet.
Yvette Arellano works for the Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services, or TEJAS.
You see the tanks, the storage tanks that are lying flat? That's Manchester.
Her group believes that environmental protections are not in place for the people living here.
You have Huntsman Chemical, Contanda Chemical, Valero Refining, Texas Port Recycling, then 26 lanes of Union Pacific Rail transporting chemical and crude oil products. This is Contanda. It houses over 93 steel carbon storage tanks of nothing but chemical and crude products. You can notice the tanks themselves are right next to these homes.
There are homes all around these tanks right here.
There are. So as the rains were hitting all of these tanks, the floodwaters were flushing their way into people's yards. This is J.R. Harris Elementary. It is in the top 1% of most toxic schools in the entire nation. So all those kids that are going out and playing during recess are completely exposed to what's going on right next to them. During natural disasters, emergencies, maintenance and startup and shutdown events, you have just a reckless amount of emissions that make their way into the local communities. We basically tracked, or have been tracking, over 5 million pounds of emissions that were released in the impacted areas. Hydrogen cyanide, sulfur dioxide, 1,3-butadiene. All of these are extremely toxic and hazardous to human health. There are absolutely no permissible amounts of things like benzene.
The Valero Energy Refinery is streets away from where children play. After the hurricane, this facility reported to the State Environmental Agency that it leaked chemicals, including cancer-causing benzene.
But no one's going to get a ticket, no one's going to get a fine, no one's going to go to court because of any of these emissions.
In communities near the shipping channel, there's a feeling that there's little accountability when leaks happen. And after the hurricane, there was a sense of urgency to change that.
We call this company right here the stinky one. because every time you drive through here, you'll smell how bad it is. I've been here for 37 years, and it's like how many years of my life have I lost living out here in this environment? But it's home. We like it here.
Juan Flores works for a group that wants to start training residents to test air quality for themselves.
During Hurricane Harvey, there was a big spill that happened right over here, and I'll show you right now, from Magellan. They ended up spilling almost 500,000 barrels of gasoline got spilled in the area. And that goes back to what people were smelling during Harvey, was a very heavy petrol gasoline smell that we had never smelled before in the area.
Magellan said that they contained the spill, but they acknowledged that there were air emissions, including benzene.
Are there known respiratory issues for kids who grow up in this area?
There's a lot of people that say their kids have asthma. Asthma's a big thing out here. I kind of feel bad for some of the people that live in these apartment complexes. Quite a few people that live here, and a lot of times these people don't really understand what's going on or don't know what the dangers are. So this is the bucket that we use. We're doing the air testing because it's our plan to try to educate the residents on how they can do samples at home and get those samples to us so we can find out exactly what it is they're smelling and what's in the air. Keep going, and so it's a vacuum. It's taking more air in it. Then I just take this off. You can see the air is inside. But we got more than enough in there for a sample.
I mean, you can see this, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
The right to breathe is a basic human right. You talk about everyday occurrences, and that's what makes Harvey an environmental justice issue, in that we have to address some of the pre-existing conditions that many communities had to grapple with.
How fast you recover from a natural disaster has a lot to do with where you live. Low-income and minority neighborhoods have fewer resources to help them.
When you talk about who has resilience, who has the money, the resources, and who has historically had the level of investments that go to protecting very wealthy neighborhoods, you can see that there's imbalance.
Greenspoint in North Houston is one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. The shopping mall here has turned into an emergency relief center.
This line, which goes on and on and on, can only be measured in the thousands and thousands of people. They've been out here in the sun for hours waiting to get basically food stamps. This isn't the normal food stamp program. All these people, to qualify, had to be affected by Hurricane Harvey.
I've been hit twice, can't afford to do that again. Until you've been in a situation like I've been in, you have to understand how I feel right about now. To lose everything twice in a row, it's really devastating.
We were in our home, me and my husband, 3 weeks, just 3 weeks. Then we got Harvey. It's headaches, it's problems, stressed.
Were you surprised when you came out and saw the line?
Oh yes, I was in shock, and I'm still in shock because the line keeps going, and it keeps coming. I didn't realize we had that many people, and we do. We need a lot of help. I mean, everybody's hurting.
Many of the people lined up won't be seen today, and this line will close in just days.
Water? Do you want cold water, ma'am? I feel you. I know.
Marina and her stepchildren have been doing what they can to help people affected by the hurricane.
My friend is in the line. He texts me, he said, Marina, come, because they have a lot of older people, they need water. And I don't know how to say no to nobody.
She's an undocumented immigrant, so she can't apply for the food disaster program herself, even though this is the second time that her home is flooded and she's lost everything.
I get donations for food, and what I do, I'll give my people food, or I cook it. We're not getting help like we're supposed to get help. You know? What? Are you serious? They're closed? Esta gente tiene todo el día de estar aquí. It's closed, y'all, till 8 o'clock tomorrow.
Y'all the news, get the news, let them know how they did this today was absolutely unorganized.
Marina lives in Greenspoint because the rent here is cheap. But that comes at a cost. The majority of apartment buildings here lie inside a flood zone. The area has flooded at least 5 times since 2001.
I'm fixing to make the rice right quick. My husband's gonna come. We're gonna have dinner together.
The water is coming after right here.
It looked like a river on here. That's when it started coming in. The water just started rising. Me and my husband, we were sitting outside watching just the water go up. I was crying. Devastating. We were just recovering from the last one. You know, it hurts. But can I have them lemons in that closet right there?
Lemons? Sure. Let's
Limes.
See. And in here, limes. Yeah, there we go. There you bet. You worried about staying in this apartment and being flooded again?
Yeah.
Are you gonna stay?
Yeah.
Why?
We're not financially doing good to go somewhere else yet. This is like third class. There's a third class where if you have it, okay. If you don't, okay. Here comes my husband, y'all. This is my husband. There's my husband, Elizabeth.
I'm Josh. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Come on, guys. It's really good. That's beef soup. Sopa de res.
Really good.
There you go.
You would choose to live somewhere else in Houston if you
Yes.
could. But there's not like affordable housing choices all over town.
Places that don't get flooded, it's like they're high. They're too high for income. It will be a good choice for us to move out of here. Better for our children, better environment.
Greenspoint is a poster child for vulnerability. When it rains, we're not talking Harvey rain. We're talking when it rains, flash floods, they get flooded. For the last 3 years, we're talking about a community that has been disrupted, where people are losing, everything. And when you start losing everything in a repetitive way, you have to ask the question, why isn't something done?
In some areas of Greenspoint, over 1/3 of the population lives below the poverty line. If the aftermath of Harvey is anything like that of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in 2005, housing prices will go up, low-income residents will be pushed out, and inequality will grow. Houston is already one of the most segregated cities in America, and it could get worse. What about renters who feel like they don't have the housing choices in Houston to move out of the floodplains?
And that's why we are building housing units now. There are several that will be coming online, fairly soon, later on this year, next year.
The city's mayor, Sylvester Turner, a Democrat, campaigned on a promise to provide more affordable housing.
I'm the mayor of the 4th largest city in this country, soon to be the 3rd. City is doing very, very well, but there's still 24% of the people in my city are working poor, okay? And they are living in the shadows of greatness, okay? And what I said when I came in as mayor 22 months ago is that I didn't want to be the mayor of 2 cities, the have and the have not. Now what we have to do is that we have to move with a greater sense of urgency to meet the need that's been exacerbated by Harvey and to put people in a better place in their lives. So, you can't run away from it. Storms of this kind, so you can't ignore it. You can't turn a blind eye to it.
After the hurricane, questions were raised about what, if anything, officials could have done to mitigate the flooding in some of the hardest hit areas. In Houston, people look to the Harris County Flood Control District, which is one of the agencies tasked with reducing flood risk for the larger metropolitan area. Since Harvey, it's been focused on recovery, clearing debris, making repairs, and preparing for the next storm.
Now I hope the new normal includes...
While we were in town, the agency, which is headed by Judge Ed Emmett, held a press conference.
For those residents who experienced the flood in 2015, a flood in 2016, and now a flood in 2017, are you doing enough for those residents?
No. That's our whole point.
And Judge, should the county prioritize efforts to help communities who have a harder time recovering from a Harvey-like incident?
I think recovery is one thing, mitigation is something else. Recovery, they are prioritized. But in terms of mitigation, no, it's a question of making the whole community safe. And so where people live is just more a question of hydrology than anything else that we need to look at.
But critics say that approach focuses on scientific technicalities and ignores the reality that some communities have been historically neglected.
The county judge is saying there's no equity lens, then those of us who are out here in the public are saying there must be an equity lens because we cannot reproduce the inequality. We cannot allow money to follow money and money to follow power when it comes to the investments that are going to be made in flood protection. That would be not only immoral, unethical, but we think it would be illegal.
Harvey was the third major flood to hit Houston in as many years, but it was far more destructive than the ones before it. As the city tries to recover, there's fear that the worst is yet to come.
Knowing that another storm will come and another storm will come, and the intensities of these storms seem to be getting even greater. We have to change course, and we have to build, in this case, a city that's more prepared and a lot more resilient the next time around.
We kind of have a code word for climate change in Texas called weird weather. So you hear people in Texas talking about weird weather this and weird weather that. It's because we really don't feel comfortable talking about climate change. Frankly, Houston hadn't seen the worst case storm. The worst case storm is one that has a surge that comes in from the coast.
The last time Texas was hit with a major storm surge was Hurricane Ike in 2008, which hit the coastal city of Galveston.
A surge storm is horrifying because it would come up the Houston Ship Channel. And we have projected at least a 25-foot surge, and the ship channel's only protected to about 15 feet. So there's 4,400 storage tanks for oil and hazardous substances there. We think 2,200 of them would be flooded. And we think it would be the worst environmental disaster in United States history. It would shut down the economic engine of the region. So it's a big deal.
You talk about thousands of lives that will be lost because of the flooding and the surge and the waves that would hit those communities that are low-lying and adjacent to. Now, there's been scenarios on that, but again, lifting up that vulnerability, and how do we address that?
We was flooded in Felicia and Ike and Allison. It's been 3. This time it was real bad.
Anybody that gets in your house, family or friends, that's the first thing I tell them. Life jacket and a raft boat. They know Houston is a flooded area just like Louisiana. They need to do something, and they need to do something fast. There's too many people, too many people.
Before we left Houston, we came back to Greens Point Mall. It was the day before the disaster food stamp program was going to end here, so people came to stand in line overnight.
Regresé a las 5 de la tarde y bueno, ya por poco me toca, pero no logré entrar. Estamos esperando para mañana. Ajá, estamos esperando. Mi casa se inundó, mi carro se inundó, yo perdí mi trabajo, mi esposo no está trabajando, necesito la ayuda. Yo me voy a esperar.
Billions of dollars in recovery aid are headed to Texas to rebuild. But it's unclear how much of that money will trickle down to those who need it the most.
7 horas haciendo línea para que nos negaran el caso y no nos dieron nada.
In this city, there's real fear that the most vulnerable residents will be left behind.
We're in a dogfight now, and the fight is to make sure that resources get distributed in a way that's equitable. And that's why I think it's important that low-income people and people of color, working-class people, rich people, poor people, we all work on this post-Harvey recovery in Houston and get it right.